Thank you.
Now, before we get to it though, I want to cover a little bit of complex sentences because they're going to come up. So just to start off, you're going to hear me say this word participle a lot. So when we talk about parts of speech, most people are familiar with nouns, verbs, adjective, adverbs, pronouns, prepositions, articles. There's another part of speech called a participle, and it's a kind of adjective. It's an active and passive adjective. So a lot of adjectives don't have active and passive forms, like big, for example. I have a big dog. So there's no active and passive form. But we have things like the exciting performer and the excited crowd. Okay. Right. The reason this is active is if you change it to a relative clause, okay, it takes this form. And here, the excited crowd, the crowd that was excited by the performance. So it has a passive sense here, and here it has an active sense. So when you just use it as a simple adjective, it maintains that active and passive sense. You can also think of it this way. The performer is responsible for causing the excitement. That's why it has the active sense. Whereas the crowd is being excited. It's the experiencer of the excitement, so it takes the passive sense. Right. Participial phrases, they start with participles, either active or passive ones. The active form is far more common, and it's probably the only one we're going to use in today's writing, but we'll quickly go over both. So participial phrases can be thought of as compressed versions of subordinate clauses or relative clauses. People don't consciously think of them that way when they're using them, but when we're learning about how to use them, it helps to think of them that way. So here's an example of a subordinate clause. While we're walking through the woods, we usually see deer. Now, to make a participial phrase from a subordinate clause, there's just a couple steps that you need to follow. Delete the subordinate conjunction or subordinating conjunction. That would be while. This is an optional step in many cases. Delete the subject. Delete any auxiliary verbs. And change the verb to the active participle. Okay, and that just means the ing form of it. It's always just the ing form. You don't need to make any other changes. So in this case, what happens with this sentence? So step one, delete the subordinate conjunction. So that's while. You can often leave while. Step two, delete the subject. Step three, delete any auxiliary verbs. And then change the verb to the active participle. It already is. So now we're left with, while walking through the woods, we usually see deer. And while is optional. You can say walking through the woods, we usually see deer, or while walking through the woods, we usually see deer. In many cases, you delete this word, but while often stays. Now, what's great about participial phrases is that this form never changes. You don't conjugate it any other way. The only conjugation for time is in the independent clause. Okay, so here's a couple other example sentences. Walking through the woods, we will probably see deer. This is future. Walking through the woods, I always see deer, present simple. Okay, note that this will not change regardless of the time information. Okay, for this example sentence, while we were driving to work, we saw an accident. Kelly, how would we transform this part into participial phrase?
Good morning.
Hi.
So basically what we need to do is just remove the while, and we will say to parse, okay. We were driving to work.
So these are the 4 steps.
So we remove the while. And the subject. So we're driving to work.
While driving to work, yep.
We saw an accident.
Yes, and you can even take out while. Driving to work, we saw an accident. While driving to work, we saw an accident. Then here, when I drive to work, I often see accidents. Okay.
Driving to.
Okay, so how do we change this one?
Driving to work. I often see accident.
Good.
So when will be the subordinate conjunction?
Yeah, and you can also
the subject.
And sorry?
And we, the subject.
Yes. So in both of these, you can leave the subordinating conjunction or you can take it out. But notice driving to work.
It doesn't change.
Doesn't change. The time information is in the independent clause. So in this case, it's past tense. In this case, it's present simple. It makes no difference to the participial phrase in this part. So the grammar is really easy. Okay. Passive voice. Because she was shocked by the news, she wept. So you're doing the exact same 4 steps, except we're using the passive participle instead of the active. Okay, I'll just write those here. Oops, can we restart the numbering? To the passive participle, and that'll be the 3rd form of the verb. Right, like give, gave, given, take, took, taken. It'll be that form. Here, because she was shocked by the news, she wept. Shocked is passive. Shocked by, right? That's your clue. Amar, how do we transform this to a participial phrase?
Yeah, because she shocked by the news, she wept.
Okay, so in this case, step 1, delete the subordinate conjunction. That's
because or live.
Yep. Step 2, delete the subject.
She shocked.
And step 3, delete The auxiliary. That's was. Was is the auxiliary. Auxiliary is a fancy word for helper verbs. Like I am talking, I was talking, I will be talking. So all those helper verbs that go in front of the main verb, you just cut them all out. And because we don't ever leave in to make the participial phrase. So it's simply shocked by the news, she wept. Okay. Some of these are exceptions. So while, when, you can leave those in, up to you. Because, you can't leave it. Amar, how about this one? Because he was given a second chance, he did much better.
Given a second chance, she did much better.
Excellent. Right? Give, gave, given. It's the third form. Given a second chance, he did much better. Right? That's all it is. And let's look at the same thing in a relative clause. And spoiler alert, the form of the participial phrase is exactly the same. We often see deer that are walking in the woods. Zubi?
Yep.
Okay. What do we need to do here?
We have to, the second part or first part? The second part.
You don't touch the independent clause.
Okay. We have to remove that, or we have to remove that and R as well.
That's it.
We often see a deer walking in the woods.
And it looks exactly the same as the subordinate to participial transformation. Walking through the woods, walking in the woods. No difference. Okay, we already did this one. Okay, so that's the mini lesson on participial phrases. Any questions? Okay, we'll apply this as we write our model. Okay, it'll come up, it'll be useful, and you'll see it in the model for this response that I'll show you in a bit. Okay, so let's have a look at today's graph. It's a stacked bar chart, hours spent on social media daily. So this chart shows the number of hours that US adults spent per day with digital media from 2008 to 2018. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. All right, so just take a few moments to have a look at the chart and then go ahead and ask any questions if there's anything that's not clear about it. Okay, any questions about this one? What are these black circles at the top? What do those represent?
These represent the total hours per day that people use online. Yeah.
The people use digital media.
Digital media.
Okay. What do the three colors represent in the stacked bars?
So the numbers at the top is the total hours represent using per media, and the graph represent how they use those hours. They use it in mobile, other connected devices, and desktop laptop.
Good. So this is a breakdown, right? This is the total, and this is broken down by device type. Notice that some of these bars don't have any numbers. These blue-gray bars. Don't make assumptions about what those values are. Because here, 2.7, what's this? So for here, 2008, what would this gray bar be?
0.3.
0.3, that's right. Here too, we've got a missing number, so we've got 2.5 and 0.9, which is 3.4. This one's also going to be 0.3.
So how you find those numbers? Is that different?
Yep. So if you look at the first one for 2008, 2 for computers, 0.4 for mobile, that's 2.4. And then 2.7 total minus 2.4 equals 0.3.
I see.
And then here we've got 3.7. We have to subtract 2.5 and 0.9. So 2.5 and 0.9 add up to 3.4. 3.7 minus 3.4 is 0.3. Yeah. I don't think you're going to need to go into so much painful detail. So what's the big pattern that you notice? There's nothing really tricky about this one. There's a pretty obvious pattern of change.
Yeah.
Gradually and steadily increase in the number of the users over the...
In the number of users?
Oh no, number of the hours they spend.
Be very careful, right?
Yeah.
Number of hours, yes. And in terms of how people access digital media, what has changed over these 10 years?
Mobile.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mobile phone using.
Has gone up like crazy, and what about the other ones?
All are increased.
No.
The desktop also
Decreased,
increased with the years.
Desktop decreased by years.
Did it increase or decrease or do both?
Decreased. Desktop.
2, 2.1, 2.4, 2.5.
Actually do both, because it started increasing and then start decreasing again.
Exactly. So what was the highest year for computer use to access digital media?
2011.
That's right. It went up to 2011 and then decreased steadily until the end of the study period.
Exactly.
And how about other connected devices? So this would probably be like tablets or something.
It's almost the same from 0.4. No, I think it starts decrease because the first one it's a 1.2 and then 0.4, 0.4, 0.5, and the end it's a 0.8. I think it started to decrease by the increasing in 8.
So it's 0.3, 0.4, 0.4, 0.3, 0.4, 4.9 minus 4.6, 0.3, 5.1 minus 4.8. This is 0.3 again, 0.5, 0.5, 0.6, 0.8. Okay, so what about percentage change?
It's increased, not decreased, isn't it?
Yeah, and how about percentages within these categories? Let's start with mobile use. And in this case, there's another, so we've talked about relative growth. If the percentages you find difficult to calculate, use fractions. Fractions might be easier in this case. So for 2008, what is the fraction of time spent on digital media using a mobile device? What is the fraction?
Over 7.
Over 2.7, yeah. So it's 0.4 over 2.7, right?
Yeah.
So in lowest common terms, what is that? What would be like a nice little fraction that this looks like? It almost goes in perfectly. See, we can just ignore the decimals. So let's say it's 4/27. It's the same thing.
1/7.
1/7, right? This is basically the same as 4/28. So equals, and we're going to use that word about, because it's not exactly. Okay, now how about in year 2018? What's the fraction in 2018?
It's 4 divided by 6.3.
Yep. And we can say we can round. Roughly?
1/3.
2/3. So it went from 1/7 to about 2/3.
Or
So,
if we write in the percentages, how much will be the percentage? Like it will be equal to 14%? Or
okay, well, my point in showing this is that you don't need to worry about that. So yeah, it would be about 14%, but if your brain just gets fried because of stress or you just can't do it, just leave it as 1/7. And then leave this one as 2/3. So don't change one of them to a percentage and leave one of them as a fraction, because that's confusing. Either percentages for both or fractions for both. And I think in this case, it's a lot easier to do the fraction, especially because people might get stuck on the 1/7. This is easy. This is 66.666%. But this one, you're right, it is 14%, but it's not such an easy calculation sometimes. Okay, so it went from 1/7 to 2/3. What about computers? It's called desktops, laptops. I'm just going to call it computers. Okay, in 2008, what was our fraction?
2 divided by 2.7.
2/2.7. So what is that? If you want to round,
Yeah.
2 divided by
2.6.
8.
Roughly 2/3. Can we say that?
Yes.
Okay. And then how about 2018? That's right.
5/6.
So it'd be 4/6.3, right?
1/4.
Sorry. No, we're doing computers. That's going to be 1.5 over 6.3. Okay, so let's call this
Quarter.
1.5 over 6. That's an easy calculation. And sorry, you said it's, I think, Amar, you said it?
About quarter.
About 1/4. Okay, so it dropped from 2/3 to about 1/4. And then finally, other in 2008 was, we said 0.3 over 2.7. This one goes in perfectly.
3/3.
So 3/27 is 1/7.
9.
9. 9, 18, 27. That's a ninth. Exactly.
Yes, 9.
And then 2018, we've got 0.8 over 6.3, which is roughly the same as 8/64. That would go in very nicely, which is how much?
1/6.
8, 1 by 8?
1/8. 8 times 8 is 64. So this one, you can say it basically stayed the same, or say stayed almost the same. I'm going to put about in here, and I'm going to leave this as here, just so we're clear. It goes approximately, and then an about, and roughly about. I think only this one is precise.
John, can we also say mostly?
No. Roughly, approximately, about. You can do you can say nearly. You can say just over. You can say just under.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but not mostly.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we do, well, before we do a general overview, does anyone have any questions about this? Does it seem pretty straightforward?
Yeah.
Okay. What other patterns do you notice? Like when we do this actual description, what stands out? So we talked about computers going up from 2 to 2.5 and then falling. Mobile devices, how would you describe this pattern for mobile devices?
Increased use?
Yes, but can you be more precise? When you're thinking about this, your job as a writer is to create word pictures for the reader. Pretend I can't see this graph. I've never seen it in my life. We're talking on the phone. Create a word picture in my mind for the mobile devices portion of the graph. Zubi.
The time spent on mobile device has increased during 10 years or decade from 1/7 to roughly 2/3 over the time period, we can say. The mobile by the US adult population has been increased from 2008 to 2018 from 1/7 to roughly 2/3.
Now, hang on a second. These numbers that we talked about here, these are the meaningful comparisons, right?
Yeah.
The meaningful comparisons generally go towards the end. So you start off with a description of what has happened. So you're describing the numbers that are actually on the graph. Okay. Save this. You can think of this as analysis, as your meaningful comparison. You can save it for the end of each part. So for mobile devices,
The use is gradually and steadily increase over the time period.
Yes. Where was a big jump? Where was the first big jump?
Two 2018?
No. Much earlier. See, 2008, 9, 10. It's at 0.4, 0.4, 0.4. What happens in 2011?
0.9?
Yeah, it more than doubles over 1 year. That's a huge increase. And then what happens in 2012?
Also double here.
Also doubles, almost doubles, right? Another huge increase. And then it continues to rise steadily until hitting 4,
Yeah.
right? Which is 10 times higher than 2008.
But it will come in the body paragraph, isn't it? If we
Yes.
describe this fact.
Yes, it will come in the body paragraph. Okay, but that's the kind of description that comes first, and then at the end, you would give something like this.
Yeah.
Over the period of the study, mobile device use went from about 1/7 of the time that people spent on digital media per day to about 2/3. Okay, so that's going to come at the end. But for now, what's the big pattern that we're going to describe in our general overview?
Total number.
Yeah, so the time increased steadily, and also that mobile devices comprised an ever-increasing percentage of people's digital media use, right? General overview. You don't want to be too vague. You don't want to be too specific. So just a big snapshot of this graph is that hours spent daily went up consistently, and mobile devices comprised a greater and greater percentage of digital media, of where people consumed digital media. Okay, that's all I'm going to say for now. That's all you need to put in the general overview. Okay. Let's choose one person to... Okay, and just a quick review, if you're new or newish in the class, the way to begin task 1, there's 2 parts in the introduction. The first part of the introduction is the context, and to get the context, you're simply paraphrasing what they give you. You're paraphrasing this, and then you can look for additional information on the graph itself. You can look at the y-axis, the x-axis, the legend. There's no source here, so we don't have that. And then you've got this, which is basically the same. Gives a little bit of extra information that it's hours. Okay. So that's the first part, and then the second part is just the general overview. Okay, let me give you a few minutes to do it, or do you want to do the first part together? You want to try it on your own, or do you want to do it together?
On.
I heard 2 people talking at the same time. Together, or do you want to try it on your own?
Because I'm new, I need together.
Okay, Zubi. So Zubi, you're not allowed to listen. You can take off your headphones and you can try on your own, and then I'll talk with Amar. Okay.
So it will be an overview. General overview.
The general overview plus the context. So the entire intro paragraph.
Okay.
Okay, 2-3 sentences max. So don't listen if you don't want any hints.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll give you 8 minutes. Okay, Amar?
Yeah.
There you are, okay. So for the introduction for task 1, it consists of 2 parts. First part is the context, and to get the context, well, let me just blow this up a little bit.
Mr. Yan, we cannot see the question.
Okay, let me share this with you. Okay, I just shared the document in the chat. Okay, in here, I'll just put this. Yeah. Okay, Amar. So
Yes.
part 1 of the introduction is the context. Part 2 is the general overview. So to get the context, you just paraphrase the graph description plus additional info from the graph. So you can do y-axis, x-axis, source if you've got one, legend, labels if there are any others. And then the general overview is, like it says, a general description of the main patterns and avoid specific numbers in the general overview because it's general, not specific, and details, minor details. Okay. If you put too much detail in the general overview, you'll get a low score. If you don't put enough detail in the general overview, you get a low score. So you've got to find like the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold.
Okay.
Okay, so here, very often, let me just copy this here. Okay, Amar, how would you paraphrase this? Just means put it in your own words.
Yeah, this chart illustrates the number of or illustrates the use of digital media by US adults
Mm-hmm.
From the period of 2008 to 2018.
Okay, let's put in some more synonyms. What's a synonym for chart?
The graph, maybe?
Yep, and instead of shows, we have illustrates. Good. The number of hours. Number of hours.
The time is spent, okay.
Okay, sure. The time spent
By American adults.
Good. So you spend time on digital media. That doesn't have a good synonym. So when it says from to, we can change it to between and. Okay, it's always from to, between and.
Okay. General.
And what else does it show, right? I would definitely mention what's in the legend here.
The type of devices used.
As well as
The devices used to access.
We'll do it like this, okay? As well as the time spent on different types of devices. So we've got total time and time by device type.
Yeah.
That's the two things.
Okay.
Okay, now the general overview. So that's the first part. I'm just going to delete this now. Now for the general overview, we start it by saying, generally speaking. Now we're going to add this phrase. It can be clearly seen that. The reason we add this phrase is because it's in passive voice. Just memorize this. Okay, ignore Microsoft. Who cares what they think? Okay, generally speaking, it can be clearly seen that. Just memorize this as a stock phrase, and you can use it in any of these type 1 graphs. Okay, it does two things. It signals to the reader that this is your overview, and it also demonstrates that you know how to use passive voice. So it helps towards grammar variety, which is an important part of your score. Okay, so here is where we put our main patterns. So what are the two big patterns that we saw?
The mobile and desktop.
Well, the first big pattern is the black circles.
Total number, yeah, total.
Okay, so in your own words, how would you describe that?
It can be clearly seen that the total number of hours spent is increased.
Hours spent on digital media increased steadily. We'll put an adverb in there, okay?
I will not mention numbers, right, in introduction.
That's right. But we do want to mention the big pattern, which is that
the mobile.
Mm-hmm.
I can say as well as the time spent on mobile devices.
As well, the time spent on mobile devices
is also increased.
Yeah, but time spent on other connected devices also increased. So we want to be a little bit more specific to say that time spent on mobile devices became like the biggest chunk, right? There's a few words that are going to be really helpful in this graph, and that's comprised. Why does it keep switching? Okay. Comprised, constituted, made up. These three words or phrases are really important for task 1. We use them all the time. As well, the time spent on mobile devices, comprised, and increasing share of time spent on digital media every day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So here I used a semicolon as well. Functions as a conjunctive adverb. If you just kept it as well as, it would make the grammar pretty pretty unwieldy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is what a solid introduction looks like. Right? For task 1, it's going to follow this pattern all the time. So it's not too specific, it's not too general. The reader, based on this, knows exactly what I'm going to talk about. Okay, we've got one coming in. Okay, Allah's is done already. It was really fast, very nice. Okay, Allah, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, the graph illustrates the frequency of hours.
Where spent?
Remember the participles lesson we just did? What do we have to get rid of to make a participial phrase? You can, yes, you can do that were spent, but it's not frequency of hours. It's not frequency, Allah. Because frequency means something over something. But this is just number of hours, right?
Yes.
So it needs to be, so it's the number of hours that were spent by U.S. adults with digital media, on digital media. Spend time on. Digital media daily between, good, generally speaking, it can be clearly seen that the number of hours were increased. Were increased or just increased?
Or just increased.
Right, how would you use were increased?
Like I put where because like I spent for mobile and another connected devices.
Okay, but were increased is passive voice.
Hello, sir. Cannot hear you.
Allah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Zubi, it's a problem with your system. Were increased is
No voice. I cannot hear you.
One sec. I just wrote you a message. Okay, were increased. That's passive voice.
Yes.
So an example of that would be, my hours at work were increased. Hello?
Hello.
Okay. Hi. So my hours at work were increased, and it's understood they were increased by my boss. Right? So in this case, there's no need for passive. The number of hours increased with,
On mobile and
yeah, on mobile. Number of hours increased on mobile and other connected devices per day. Generally speaking, we clearly seen that the number of hours increased on mobile and other connected devices per day during the given period, good, while the time that's spent.
while the time spent.
Good. Your choice is that was spent or just spent. Remember the rule from earlier in class today? That was spent is a relative clause, right?
Yes.
So to change a relative clause into a participial phrase, what do you have to do? What's the first step?
We delete that and and was
Exactly.
the time spent.
But you have to delete all the stuff, right? It's important to also kill the auxiliaries. While the time spent on desktop laptop was fluctuated. Again, same issue, right?
No need for was.
Right, because it's not passive.
Yeah.
It's just the same as changed. Fluctuated. One letter is wrong. How do you spell fluctuated properly? One letter is off.
No.
You instead of.
That's right.
I.
Yes, that's right.
Very nice. Okay, we've got Zuby. Zuby's next. The staked bar charts. Stacked. Bar graph depicts the number of hours, no comma, U.S. adults spent using digital media over a decade. It's not a specific decade, it's just 10 years. Good. We got to put the space in there. Got to put the space in there. Generally speaking, it can be clearly seen that the duration of time spent using mobile has steady. Okay. This is 2018, which is in the past. It means it's finished. So you can't use present perfect to describe a specific past time. There's some cases where you can, but I'm not going to go into those. As far as we're concerned, don't do it. So the duration of time spent, you can't say has increased, just increased.
Okay.
Past simple. Steadily, you need the adverb. You did it correctly with gradually, so we need to do it with steadily, and gradually increased over the study period, comma, while the use of other devices remained almost the same during 10 years' time. I'm just going to change this to over the 10, because it's specific over the 10 years. Almost the same. Over the 10 years. Good. Duration of time spent using mobile. Very nice. I like it. Okay, Dina. Illustrates how many hours in a day American users I would just say Americans, just to clean it up a little bit. Americans spent on 3 types of digital media between 2008 and 2000. See, it's not digital media. Media is the stuff that you view on your device, but they're actually talking about devices, and this is the time spent on digital media. 3 types of digital devices. In a day, Americans spend on 3 types of digital devices. Okay, good. Overall, it can be clearly seen that the that although the total number of hours used by adult Americans per day is increased, the hours spent on desktop and laptop decreased over the period given. Okay, very nice. Kelly.
Yeah, it's the second one.
Oh, there's two here? Okay.
Yes, by mistake, I forgot to add something.
Okay, the graph. Okay, here we go. The graph depicts. The graph depicts the total time spent between 2018 as well as never followed by a comma. And when I say never, I mean 95%, as well as the total hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as well as and as well are used in two different ways. I'm going to talk about this very quickly first.
Yeah.
As well is like a conjunctive adverb, like however, furthermore. So you would use it like independent clause, semicolon, as well, comma, independent clause.
Okay.
As well as just means and. It's when you keep saying and, occasionally as well as can help you in that situation to differentiate between different items. But here, the graph depicts the total time spent between as well as the total hours. It's the same as and. The total hours spent using different devices in the US. So you haven't mentioned total time spent on what?
Devices.
What's the total time on?
You can see the graph.
Digital media.
Digital, yeah.
Okay, total hours spent on digital media rose steadily. As well, comma, the time spent using mobile devices constituted an increasing percentage or amount. Percentage increasing. Because it's a percentage of time spent.
Yeah.
Time spent using mobile devices constitute an increasing percentage of time spent on digital media on a daily basis. Okay, good. All right, any questions so far? Okay, so why don't we take a short break? Okay, here we go. The bar graph illustrates the time spent on digital devices daily by American adults between 2008 and 2018, as well as the time spent on different types of devices. Overall, it can be clearly seen that the total time spent on digital media increased steadily, with mobile devices comprising an increasing share of the total hours per day. Comprising is a word that comes up all the time. Synonyms include constituting and making up. An average adult in the US spent 2.7 hours per day on digital media in 2008, and that figure continued to grow steadily, doubling by 2015, and continuing to increase to a peak of 6.3 hours per day in 2018. Okay, so this is the top, the black circles. An average adult in the US spent 2.7 hours per day on digital media in 2008, and that figure continued to grow steadily, doubling by 2015, it's 5.4, and continuing to increase to a peak of 6.3 hours per day in 2018. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Broken down by device type. This is a good phrase if you've got a situation where you've got a total number of hours, which is broken down into its constituent parts. The time spent on cell phones remained at 0.4 hours per day from 2008 to 2010. That's broken down by device type. The time spent on cell phones remained at 0.4 hours per day from 2008 to 2010. That's this one. Thank you for catching that. More than doubled in 2011 to 0.9 hours per day. Nearly doubled again the following year to 1.75 hours per day, and continued to climb steadily to 4 hours per day in 2018. And then I put the analysis at the end. While mobile devices accounted for only about 1/7 of the time people spent on digital media in 2008, this skyrocketed to just under 2/3 of total time spent on digital media in 2018. So that's the analysis portion, right? Okay. Notice that this is just description, description, description. And then the last part is the meaningful comparison. Let's go on here. The time devoted to desktops and laptops, on the other hand, followed a different pattern. So we've got a nice introductory sentence here. It started at 2 hours per day in 2008 and went up gradually to reach an all-time high of 2.5 hours in 2011. So that's this part here. We're looking at the orange. From there, though, it decreased to 1.8 hours per day in 2015, remaining at this level for another 2 years before finally dropping to 1.5 hours in 2018. Okay, so this is the description portion. 2 sentences. Analysis. Over the period of the study, while computer use made up over 2/3 of hours spent per day on digital media in 2008, this figure dropped to less than 1/4 by 2018. So again, I'm staying consistent with fractions, 2/3 to 1/4. And finally, the time spent on other digital devices remained between 0.3 and 0.5 hours per day for the first 9 years, ending at 0.8 hours per day in 2018. Other connected devices comprised 1/9 of the time US adults spent on digital media in 2008, and this ratio stayed consistent throughout the period of the study, ending at roughly 1/8 of time spent on digital media in 2018. Okay, so analysis saved for last. Do a couple things here. I want to take a look at participial phrases for a second. Let's look at the first sentence here. And let's go with Amar. An average adult in the US spent 2.7 hours per day on digital media in 2008, and that figure continued to grow steadily. It doubled by 2015 and continued to increase to a peak of 6.3 hours per day in 2018. We can transform this second part into a participial phrase. Now, we looked at the original. It was a participial phrase in the original, so this is just a chance to recreate that. Okay, how would you do it, Amar?
Yeah, you mean the shaded sentence?
Yes, we're going to combine it with the first part by transforming it into a participial phrase. We talked about subordinate clauses and relative clauses being transformed into participial phrases, but you can do the same thing with a sentence. It's exactly the same principle. Start by deleting the subject and transform the verb into either an active or passive participle. Get rid of any auxiliaries.
Yeah, while doubled by.
You don't need any other word.
Remove it.
Good.
And
we're gonna put a comma here.
Yeah.
So is this active voice or passive voice? We have it doubled. Is that active or passive?
It's active. Right?
Yes, it's active voice, so we have to change it into the active participle.
Passive. Yeah, it's passive now. Doubled.
So we have to keep it active. So it needs to be doubling. Doubling by 2015 and continuing to increase. Okay, so instead of it doubled to doubling, continued, continuing.
Can I continue as a passive? Can I say doubled by 2015 and continued to increase?
No. No, doubled would be it was doubled by. Right? I think this is causing some confusion. By doesn't mean by a person. This is just by the year, right?
Yes.
So it doubled by 2015. The participial version would be doubling by 2015. In, by, doesn't matter. Okay. Kelly, how about the next one? From there, though, it decreased to 1.8 hours per day in 2015 and remained at this level for another 2 years before it finally dropped to 1.5 hours in 2018. What could you change to a participial phrase here? Kelly might have stepped away. Someone else want to try this one?
Yes.
Oh, there she is. Okay.
Increasing.
Okay, so Kelly's going to give it a shot.
So it's increasing?
Well, remember, you have to keep an independent clause in there somewhere because you're going to end up with a fragment. So I would suggest you leave this alone.
Okay. It makes sense, yeah. Yeah. So it will be from there, though it decreased to 1.8 hours per day in 2015 and remaining.
We're going to get rid of and.
Yeah, remaining another 2 years. At this level for another 2 years before finalizing.
Before finally
dropping.
Good. Here, let me just. So good, that's what you did. From there, though, it decreased to 1.8 hours per day in 2015, remaining at this level for another 2 years before finally dropping to 1.5 hours in 2018. So this is a very nice participial phrase followed by another participial phrase. Okay. Allah. Are you there, sir? Maybe he has stepped away. How about Zubi?
Yes, sir. So we have to remove finally.
Remember, you have to keep part of it as an independent clause, or you're going to have a fragment.
Spend on other digital device remaining between 0.3 and 0.5 hours per day for 9 years and ending at 0.8 hours per day in 2018.
If you do that, like, you've got a fragment.
So if we remaining and ending will be with INGs, and
you should leave this part alone because this is an independent clause, the highlighted part.
Finally, the time. Okay, the all we have to.
Because
and only the ending.
That's right. That's exactly it. Instead of and ended, change it to ending.
So we have to leave the whole sentence.
Well, you need an independent clause. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, it has.
It means it can be a sentence by itself without anything else. So every single sentence must have an independent clause or it's a fragment. It's not a sentence, it's part of one. So you have to have that. The participial phrase transformation is for, you can use it for a lot of relative clauses, a lot of subordinate clauses, and in many cases where you have compound sentences, something like this. And it ended or and ended, doesn't matter. The same rule applies. You would usually, not always, usually get rid of the conjunction. If you had it, you'd get rid of that too. If you had any auxiliaries, you would get rid of those too, and just change the verb into the participle.
The finally here is not.
No, there's nothing.
In the back.
Yeah, nothing wrong with it.
Have to get it. Okay.
No, you can leave adverbs, even with a.
Like if.
Sorry, it's really hard to understand what you're saying because your audio keeps cutting in and out, in and out, in and out.
I'm just asking the finally, because this one is a continuation of the previous sentence, and it's come like finally. So we don't have to get rid of this as a condition?
No.
No?
No problem. And you can even leave it, if you had an adverb here in front of ending, you can keep it there. Adverbs can modify participles. Remember, adverbs modify verbs, other adverbs, and adjectives. Participles would count. And then Amar, can we do the last one?
Yeah, other connected device comprised
1/9.
Yeah, from and this ratio, I can delete staying consistent from 2008, staying consistent throughout the period of the study.
So there's a couple of ways we could do it. That's a different one. You would change it to with this ratio staying consistent. And we can change this. And is optional, you can leave it in. Okay. So that's the kind of stuff you can do. Do it once or twice in your writing, and that gives you greater variety of complex structures. If you're not confident that it's going to work, don't do it. But you can take some chances given that this is a class and try and add participial phrases to your writing.
Okay.
So here, let's just take this and do what we did before. Okay, all I'm going to do is change our model into point form. So this is the ideal practice process, and some of you should really follow this to the letter. It is somewhat time consuming, but it works, and you need all the help you can get, especially when this is a second language. Stage 1, copy the model by hand 1 to 3 times. Just write it out slowly. Let it sink in to your bones. This is a time-tested technique of copying a model of the kind of writing that you want to do. Okay. Second step is transform the model into point form. Then you rewrite the assignment based on your point form notes and compare to the original. The third step is put everything away. Okay, so you don't look at your notes, don't look at anything. This is your third attempt to do this, is you write it and post it in the forum for me to check, and then you revise based on my feedback. This is time consuming for sure, but this is how you learn. Okay, I'm going to leave the intro alone, and let's just change all this stuff into point form. Okay. Let's do this orally. I'm going to choose a couple of people. Ala, are you there? You're still not there. Okay. Zubi, why don't we start with you?
Okay.
Just tell us about the... Let's just do the first part, okay?
Okay.
So you're doing the black circles for total hours per day, and you're also going to talk about mobile in this paragraph. So just use these point form notes to take these point form notes and pull them apart into full sentences for your description, okay?
Okay. In year 2008, an average adult used spend 2.7 hours per day on digital media.
Good. And don't say in year 2008, just in 2008.
In 2008.
Okay, good.
And this will continue to grow steadily. And it is peaked. It got doubled in 2015, and it will continue steadily or gradually continued, and it gets its peak in 2018.
Okay, hang on.
Rate of 6.
Okay, so there's a bunch of mistakes there. Let's start again. Remember, the whole thing has to be in past tense.
Okay.
Okay. Start again, please. Just this part.
So the figure continued to grow, and it got doubled in 2015, and the trend was continued, and it peaked in 2018 at the rate of 6.3 hours per day.
Very good, but it's not a rate. Just at 6.3 hours per day. Good. This figure continued to grow steadily, doubling by 2015, and continued to increase until it reached its peak of 6.3 hours per day in 2018. Okay, continue.
So I have to leave it like broken down by the device type. The time span on cell phone was 0.4 hours per day in 2018 to 2010, and then the number has doubled or increased by 2 times in 2011. That is 0.9 hours per day, and it is nearly doubled in 2012 by the rate of 1.75 hours per day. And this continued to climb steadily up to year 2018 by 4 hours per day.
Continue to climb steadily to 4 hours per day in 2018. Okay, now be careful. I thought I heard present perfect. Remember, you can't use present perfect when you're speaking about events in the past. Okay. So broken down by device type, the time spent on cell phones amounted to or was 0.4 hours per day between 2008 and 2010, and it more than doubled in 2011 to 0.9 hours per day. It nearly doubled again in 2012 to 1.7 hours per day and continued to climb steadily to 4 hours per day in 2018. Okay, one more time. Remember, we can do this in a couple sentences. Trying to put this all together into one, that's pretty ambitious. We're just doing exercises, but if you need to do this in more than 1 or 2 sentences, that's fine. Okay, go ahead.
Time spent on cell phone is increased between 2008 and 2010.
It didn't increase. It was the same.
Or remains same. Sorry, time spent on cell phone remained same between 2008 and 2010. It was 0.4 hours per day. It got doubled in 2011 by 0.9 hours per day.
To 9 hours. It doubled to 0.9 hours per day, not by. 2.
Over 2. TO2.
Yeah, it doubled to, or more. Okay, can you say this? It more than doubled in 2011 to 0.9 hours per day. You know, I'm gonna break this down a little bit for you. Do 4 sentences if you need to, and we'll put them together later. Okay, go ahead.
Like this. The number of we can like if all together. Time spent on a cell phone remained same between 2008 and 2010, 2.4 hours per day, and it showed its speed to peak 2 times. It got its peaks in 2 different years, 2011 and 2012.
No.
That is all.
Those were not peaks. Those were not peaks. The peak was, there's only one peak, and that's 2018. Right? It did double in.
Okay, doubled.
Okay, so you're going too fast, and you're going too fast, and you're also trying to make complicated changes. Zubi, for you specifically, you have to stay simple because of all the sentence structure issues in your writing. Don't try and complicate it. We got to simplify. So let's do 4 sentences. Let's do the first one, okay?
Time spent on cell phone in 2008 and during 2008 and 2010 remained same at 0.4 hours per day.
Okay, the time spent on cell phones between 2008 and 2010 remained at 0.4 hours per day. Remember, it's from, to, or between, and. Those are your choices. From, to, or
between.
One more time.
Time spent on cell phone between 2008 and 2010 remained 0.4 hours per day.
Remained at 0.4 hours per day. Okay. Go on.
It got doubled.
It more than doubled.
In 2011 at 0.9 hours per day.
Okay, be careful. It more than doubled in 2011. So you would say it doubled to. Whoops, in 20.
It doubled. 11. 2.
Okay, one more time.
It doubled. No.
It more than doubled.
More than doubled in 2011 to 9 hours per day.
Good.
0.9 hours per day.
Okay, good.
Once again, nearly doubled in 2012 to 1.7 hours per day.
Good. Once again, it nearly doubled in 2012 to 1.7 hours per day. Nice.
And it continued to climb steadily to 4 hours per day in 2018.
Good. And then you can add something like which was the highest amount recorded for mobile use. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, and how about the last part? Remember, we want to use these words.
Yeah.
Constituted, made up, or comprised. You have to be fully comfortable with these three phrases. Okay, so where it says equals, you can use any one of those.
Mobile devices constituted about 1/7 of the time spent on a digital media in 2008 compared, oh no, sorry.
Which
skyrocketed to just under 2/3 of a total time spent in 2018.
Very good. Just pronunciation. This is 1/7 with a th at the end, seventh, and this is 2/3. Okay, one more time for this one.
So mobile devices constituted only about 1/7 of a time spent on a digital media in 2008, which was skyrocketed to just under 2/3 of a total time spent in 2018.
Very nice. Just don't use passive voice. Don't say which was skyrocketed, just which skyrocketed. Okay, or like we practiced earlier, skyrocketing to just under 2/3. Okay, Zubi, I don't want you to hate me, but I want you to do this one more time, this last one.
I love to do this.
Okay.
For the mobile devices, only about 1/7 of the time is spent on digital media.
What about the verb? Mobile devices, we need a verb.
Yeah, constituted or made up of.
Good.
Mobile devices constituted only about 1/7 of time spent on digital media in 2008, which skyrocketing to just under 2/3 of total time spent in 2018.
Okay, I heard which skyrocketing. It has to be which skyrocketed. Remember, if you're using...
So we don't use,
So
skyrocketing.
Just which skyrocketed, that's a relative clause.
Yes. If you remove the which, then it is skyrocketing.
Okay, last time.
So after this 2008, we have to put comma, then skyrocketing?
Well, orally, it doesn't matter, but yes. Okay. Instead of which skyrocketed, comma, skyrocketing. Yep.
Mobile devices made up of only about 1/7 of the time spent on digital media in 2008, skyrocketing to just under 2/3 of total time spent in 2018.
Okay, good. Except for one small thing. I heard you say made up of. And it's not made up of, it's made up as a verb. Made up of is a passive construction.
Okay, total of.
So it's made up, was made up of.
Okay.
Okay, so in the active form, you're just using made up. That's a synonym for these two.
Okay.
Okay, let's have another volunteer. I get those two words confused. Okay, let's go with Allah. Are you there, or is still audio issues?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're just transforming this point form into full sentences. You're only talking about the orange computer bars.
Okay. So desktop and laptop, which followed different pattern. We can say that.
Well, it's going to be a fragment.
Or
if you just say desktops and laptops followed a different pattern, stop.
followed different mountain tower. Okay, desktop and laptop followed different pattern at 2 hours per day in 2018.
2008.
2008, which gradually reached all-time high of 2.5 hours in 2011.
Okay, hang on. Good, but you're missing a bunch of articles. So desktops and laptops followed a different pattern. Please repeat.
Okay. Desktops and laptops followed a different pattern.
Good. They went from 2 hours per day in 2008 and gradually reached an all-time high of 2.5 hours in 2011.
Okay, so desktop and laptops followed a different pattern at 2 hours per day in 2008 and gradually reached an all-time high of 2.5 hours in 2011.
Okay.
And then decreased to 1.8 hours per day in 2015. 2015 here. Okay. 2015.
You get 1.8, 1.8, 1.8.
Yes, which continued the same for the 2 hour, for the 2 years, for the next 2 years.
Good.
Before dropping to 1.5 hours in 2018. Computer uses.
This is like this is the analysis one, the meaningful comparison.
So computer users made up over 2/3 time in 2018 and less than 1/4 in 2008.
Okay, we can change that a bit. Remember, where it says equals, you can use words like comprise, made up, constituted.
Constituted, yes.
So computer use constituted over 2/3 of time spent on digital media in 2008, dropping to less than 1/4 in 2018. Can you repeat that? Computer use, which constituted over 2/3 of the time that Americans spent on digital media in 2008, dropped to less than 1/4 of the time spent in 2018.
Okay, computer users constituted over 2/3 of the time that Americans spent on digital media in 2008, and then dropped to less than 1/4 in 2018.
Very good. Just don't call it computer users, but computer use.
Okay.
Because we're not talking about people, we're talking about time.
Time, yes.
Very nice. And then let's go with one more person. Kelly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going for the last part here.
Yeah. On other digital devices.
Comprised, constituted, or made up?
Comprised.
Okay.
Between 0.3 and 0.5 hours per day for the first 9 years.
Good.
Ending at 0.0 hours per day in 2019.
Okay.
Now I'm going to call.
So
made up.
Other device use.
Yes, other device use.
Made up, constituted, comprised.
Made up 1/9 of time in 2008. And staying consistent roughly 1/8 of the time in 2018.
Okay, so let's work on this last one.
Mm-hmm.
Other connected devices made up 1/9 of the time spent in 2008, with this ratio staying consistent over the 10 years of the study. We can say ending at roughly 1/8 of time spent in 2018.
Ending, okay.
Yep, go ahead one more time.
Okay, so mobile devices.
We're on other connected devices.
Sorry, other connected devices made up 1/9 of time in 2018. Ratio. Spent. Staying consistent. Is this radio staying consistent?
It's pronounced ratio. Like TI is often pronounced sh, like TION is shun, so this is ratio. Ratio.
Okay, ratio, staying consistent.
Over the period of the study.
Over the period of the study, roughly 1/8.
Ending at roughly 1/8 in 2018. We can do it like this. Other connected.
Roughly 1/8 of time. Roughly also we can say like about, around.
Yes, approximately, same thing.
Okay.
One question: Can I ignore with? Can I delete with? Can I say this ratio remaining consistent?
Yes, but I would include it. I would keep it. Technically, it's correct, but it's going to sound a bit awkward. In this case, I'm just trusting my ears. The other way you could do this, if you want a simpler version, like a less complex version, you can just, let me just copy that. Other connected devices is made up one, and just say, and this ratio remain consistent. You can do it like that.
Okay.
Okay, Kelly, one more time. This part, go ahead.
The other connected devices made up 1/9 of time in 2018.
1/9 of time spent.
1/9 of time spent in 2018. Again, all connected devices made up 1/9 of time spent in 2018. Sorry, 2008.
Mm-hmm. And this?
And this ratio staying consistent.
Ending at?
Ending at about roughly, approximately 1/8 of time
spent
in 2018.
Good. Okay, so you don't want to mix these two up. If you say, and this ratio remained consistent, or with this ratio remaining consistent.
With. It sounds better for me with, yeah.
Right, so this is a more complex form than the second version here, but if you screw it up, it's wrong. So it has to be with this ratio remaining consistent over the period of the study. It might just be easier to remember, and this ratio, and this amount, and this figure remained consistent over the period of the study, ending at roughly 1/8.
Okay.
Okay, any questions? Okay, I strongly suggest, so we've got this multiple times. I'm going to clean up this document before I post it, but step 1, write this out by hand. Don't even retype it, just copy it out by hand. It shouldn't take you more than, what, 10 minutes? Okay. It took me about 10 minutes to write this from scratch. It shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes to just rewrite this by hand. Don't rush it. Try and enjoy the process. Say it out loud to yourself. Let it just seep into your body.
Okay.
That pencil-brain connection. Stage 2. Use these point form notes to summarize, okay? You can do it orally, but you should also write a full paragraph based on the point form. And this is a grammar focus. Okay, there are many ways to do this. There are many ways to transform this point form into full sentences and paragraphs, many ways to structure the sentences. Any way you do it, as long as it's correct, is fine. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. And you would do that for each of these paragraphs and compare to the original. And if you're just wondering if your version of a sentence is just as grammatically correct as the original version, just put it in the Q&A forum. Okay? Just say, Jan, this is the version that I rewrote based on the point form, and I'm not sure if these sentences are also grammatically correct. Okay, and just pop them into the Q&A forum, and I'll check those separately. And then the last step, put everything away and just write on your own. All right, so this is due Monday by noon. You've got lots of time to do this between today and Monday.
Okay.
Okay. Learning to write well. You're going for band 7. Band 7 means advanced level English. Anything below 7 is intermediate. Advanced level English writing of this is not easy. Nobody in the history of the world has learned how to do this quickly. It doesn't work that way. Right? Writing.
Sorry, it's my son.
It's like how kids learn to write in school. It takes a long period of time. They don't do all of these steps that we do, so it's not going to take you as long as a kid to learn how to write, but it's not the fastest process in the world. It's the same as with any other sport. Many of you are doctors. If a patient came to you and said, I want to have the body of an Olympic swimmer, right? And it's just an ordinary person. How long is it going to take that person to have the body of an Olympic swimmer? 2 years, 3 years of training, right? Writing shouldn't take that long, but it does take a while, right? You want to become a great golfer, it's going to take you a couple of years, at least, right? So,
Jen, I've got a question for you.
go ahead.
When you said to write the outline, do you want to write it in the post here?
Don't post it separately. Just post the outline at the top of your writing.
Okay.
Right. And that's a very good practice to follow always when you're writing anything. Remember, writing consists of content, arrangement, and delivery. It's always been this way. It always will be this way. When you do point form first, you're separating that process into first, I'm going to clarify that I understand the content. Write it in point form. Make sure it's arranged properly while it's still in point form. And only then, when you're happy with your point form version, only then transform that into full sentences and paragraphs. It doesn't make sense to just start writing.
I see.
You summarize your key ideas in point form first. It's really small, and it allows you to, this literally is related to field of view. Your brain can take in, I can't remember the precise number of centimeters, but it can take in only a certain amount of centimeters at one glance.
Mm-hmm.
When you write in point form first, you're catching that whole idea in a single glance and then looking back at the diagram and looking back at your idea. If you've got these long sentences, you can't take it in at a single glance anymore. So we're trying to physically make it small.
Yeah.
Right? Once you're happy with your ideas, only then pull them apart into full sentences.
Okay, so
it's easier for your brain to break down a complicated process into the steps.
Mm-hmm. So
even professional writers do that. Yep, sorry, go ahead.
So we do yours first, your out point, we write by hand, and then we do our point, and then our writing, right?
Yes, first you copy. Just copy by hand.
Yeah.
Second, you take this point form version, and you can do it on computer if you want. You can do it by hand. You take the point form and you transform it into full sentences and paragraphs, and then you compare them to the original, which is in this document.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can critique it by yourself. If you're wondering whether any of your sentences are correct or not, just pop those into the Q&A forum.
Okay.
And then the final version, you put everything away and you just write it as you would during the exam, just based on the diagram and nothing else. You don't look at your notes.
Okay.
And then obviously I'll give you feedback and then you revise. So you're writing this thing 1, 2, 3, 4 times.
Okay.
Okay. The model, point form to full, forum, revision.
Okay.
All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, you too.
Everyone as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.